Welcome to the latest segment of Moments Off the Mat, presented by USA Wrestling. I'm Tony Black, the Director of State Services for USA Wrestling. Today I'm joined by Stephanie Murata and Dr. Jenny Wong, two previous World Team members for Team USA. Thanks to both of you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So first question, obviously you two were pioneers for women's wrestling in our country. Before all of that, which we'll get to, your World Team experience, you started out wrestling as a youth. What led to you to the decision to wrestle? And did it take any convincing of your parents to let you wrestle? And along the same lines, what would you say to any young girl or any parents of young girls about participating in the sport of wrestling?
You want first or second?
You go first.
Okay. So actually I started a little bit later than most. I would say, even though I was sort of the beginning of the new guard, there was a whole section of women that wrestled prior to my becoming involved with wrestling. And I actually started in college. So I didn't even start when I was a kid. So it was a little bit, I don't know, more par for the course. I think it's a little bit different now. The people that are very competitive have started when they were younger. So I didn't have to deal with that. I did have to deal with convincing my parents that it was a good idea for me to wrestle instead of actually moving on with my life. So that was a little bit different, but pretty much as long as I could manage it and figure out a way to do it, they were supportive of it.
Jenny, I know you started wrestling younger than that, so.
Yeah, because I met you in college,
Yep.
freshman year. Yep. So I started freshman year in high school. I just heard the guys in math class talking about it, and I said, that sounds like a lot of fun. But it was kind of really not an expected thing for me to do because I was kind of quieter and more shy. And yeah, it did take a little bit of convincing for my parents. They're pretty liberal. Weren't super strict like the stereotype for Asian parents are, but still telling them that it was a good idea that their daughter go out and wrestle on the boys team, just kind of out of nowhere. It was kind of unexpected for them. But they let me do it, and they were really supportive of it once they saw how much I liked it. And then as far as for the younger girls coming up, for them and their family, something that I always had to keep telling myself was that as long as you're there for the right reasons, don't doubt your right to be there, and just earn their respect by working harder than everyone else. Not words, but just showing them that you're there to work hard. And then eventually, there's nothing that they can do but to respect you.
Yeah, Jenny, what was the expression you just said? If it's right for you to be there, what did you just say?
As long as you know that you're there for the right reasons. In our time when girls would join the team, people would be like, "Are you trying to, date the boys? Are you trying to get attention?" But it was obviously none of that. I just had to kind of ignore that and be like, I'm here because I want to get better and because I love the sport. And I knew that I was there for the right reasons, and I just had to just keep working hard and showing them that I was there for the right reasons. So
great. Appreciate the answer by both of you. So both of you were some of, like I said, some of the pioneers. You were some of the initial women's wrestling residents at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs in the early 2000s. Terry Steiner was named the head women's freestyle coach in 2002. What was it like for both of you in that training environment, not only with Coach Steiner, but also with other high-level world caliber athletes, all training with a single mission?
I think that the first time I ever went to the training center was in I don't know, 96 or 97. And I came as USA Wrestling was super supportive. as well as Coach Burnett at the time. And he actually allowed me to come to the men's training camp. So I came to several of the men's training camps even prior to there being a women's resident program. So I think for me, the biggest difference was being able to utilize all of the facilities and have a team where it's a unique opportunity to have everyone in the same place going in the same direction, and everybody has the same mindset. And I think if you talk to the average person and you're like, oh yes, I'm working out 3 times a day and I'm running like 10 miles beforehand and doing all of these different things that are required for each sport, most people would think you're kind of weird. But there it's normal. You're like, oh, you know what? Oh yeah, you go bike. I'm gonna go swim like 3 miles, and we'll meet back here and have lunch or something. I mean, it's the sort of extraordinary is very normal in that environment, and I think that helps everybody sort of reach higher levels because everybody is so focused on their goal going forward. So I was really appreciative of the opportunity that came up.
All right.
Oh, I don't know. So yeah. And Jenny, there we go.
Good answer. Yeah, so joining the residency program at the Olympic Training Center, that was kind of a big deal for me because prior to that, and you saw this when we were on the same team in Wisconsin, being the only girl, you're kind of a little bit of an afterthought. You know, there were so many coaches that took time to help me, and I'm so grateful for that, but it was always after the guys were taken care of. You know, we were extra, so to speak. So having a dedicated coach for us, and dedicated strength and conditioning and sports psychology, sports nutrition, exercise physiology, having all those things dedicated to us was really instrumental in helping us make a step up in wrestling, so to speak.
Yep, right. The everyone with a singular focus and devoted resources. I think that obviously makes perfect sense with what you were saying. Jenny, shortly after moving to the training center, you made the 2003 World Team, representing the Team USA at the World Championships. It was your first senior level World Championships. The 2003 World Championships were held in New York City at Madison Square Garden. What was it like for you personally to compete in your first senior World Championship in your home country?
Yeah, well, Tony, if you remember, 2001, that was when the World Championships were supposed to be in New York. And then that was around the time that 9/11 happened. And with everything that was going on in New York, we had to give the World Championships away for that year. And then thankfully, I think it was France that allowed us to have 2003 World Championships in New York, just kind of as a kindness for us. And then so making that team, it had a special meaning to it. There was a lot of patriotism. The country kind of came together at that time, you know, tough times, kind of like now. We have to come together, and that was no different. And so it was really an honor to make that team. And before even wrestling, we, you know, visited Ground Zero, just had some quiet moments there. And then we were, you know, ready to go. We were so excited to go to the country. And I don't know if you remember this, but that was the first time that every single world team member had medaled, like 7 for 7, the women's freestyle team. And so that was kind of special. So I know that we were all super excited to represent our country as best as we could that time.
Yeah, that's great. I do know it was like 2 years. So 9/11 obviously was 2001. 2 years to the day, I think a lot of the team members went to Ground Zero. Probably a very humbling, very somber moment for the people that were there. So that's really cool. were able to be part of that.
Yeah.
And 7 for 7 isn't bad either. So Steph, I know you weren't on 7 or 8, you were on 9 world teams between 1996 and 2007. That was during the time when women's wrestling was still fighting for its rightful seat at the table. What I would say is collegiately, we still are fighting for that, right?
Right.
But by the time you retired, women's wrestling was an Olympic sport. What were your thoughts when you found out that women's wrestling was going to be an Olympic sport?
Wow. You know, I think that was always sort of like the carrot right in front of me, and why I stayed in women's wrestling for so long. I think as ironically, as I was growing up, I always wanted to go to the Olympics, but I didn't know how I was going to get there or what I was going to do. I played a lot of different sports and did a lot of different things, but I had no idea I just didn't have any clue. I was, watching the Olympics and saying, oh my goodness, that's amazing. I want to try that. But as things progressed and as things went on, I feel that I started wrestling thinking that we were going to be included in the 2000 Olympics. And as we all know, that didn't happen. Women's weightlifting did. So then had to continue to wait and continue to train and try for 2004. And then the next question is, okay, well, can you wait and can you try again? Is it, are you enjoying yourself? Do you want to do something else? And I think that I always was very, very lucky and enjoyed a measure of success with wrestling, obviously. And so being able to train and compete and travel and experience different countries and different people was always, I don't know, I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed seeing that section of the world. I felt like even if I could go back to those countries after I was finished, I would never see it in the same light, and I would never be able to see the same things. So for me, my end goal obviously was to make the Olympic team, which I didn't do, but I think the sort of byproduct of it was that I was able to see a lot of the world and portions of the world that I probably would never be able to. So I feel that having the Olympics as a goal, sort of much like everything else, when you have a goal that's sort of you're reaching for as much as you possibly can, even if you fall a little short, I think it's okay, because you end up with a lot more and gaining a lot along the road.
Yeah, thanks. So I know both of you competed for Sunkist Kids, right, on the senior level. Mm-hmm. Sunkist, supported by Art Martori, certainly one of the clubs that has a really rich history of supporting women's wrestling, right? If you go back to Trish Saunders, I mean, and many people since, Sunkist has just done a wonderful job supporting its athletes, but especially both genders. Now, and I'll pick on Jenny first, so you don't have to wonder who's going to answer first. But Jenny, can you talk about what it meant to you as an athlete to have that kind of club support when you were training?
It was so amazing. They actually picked me up my freshman year in college. So that was before I had made any national teams. And that was a huge boost, just that they thought that I was good enough to wrestle for them. And then having been on the team, Art Martori, he is an amazing human being. He just loves the sport of wrestling, and then, wants to help the athletes in the sport that he loves so much, just try to reach the highest levels. And wrestling for Sunkist, I never felt like being a woman, never felt like he had put the men's team above us, so we were just all athletes, not male or female. And he treated us really well. And then furthermore, I really wanted to represent them well. Number one, because their belief in me, And number two, I really wanted to do really well for art because he's just an amazing person. You know, he told me once that he didn't care if I didn't win another match. He just wanted me to be successful in life. And that really meant a lot to me. So that kind of goes to show you what kind of person Art Martori is. So I'll forever be thankful to him for picking me up and making me part of the Sunkist Kids.
Steph, do you have a similar perspective or any anecdote that you want to share as well?
Yes, I think that one of the things that the Martoris did, and I don't want to just say Art, he also obviously got the ball rolling and has been amazing as far as his support of women and everything else, but I don't want to forget the rest of his family because I feel that they have also been very, very supportive. His wife and all of his girls. So I think that all of them have been extremely supportive of women's wrestling. So I want to make sure that we include them as far as the Martori family and not just Art. I feel that his support has been, I'm not sure if women's wrestling would be where it's at without him, to be honest. He was that instrumental in having the support of the women's team, as well as his ability to help others see that as well.
No, I think that both of you very well spoken, right? I think understand the contributions of Art and the other or the rest of the Martori family, not only for wrestling but in particular women's wrestling. I think, Steph, you're absolutely right. I personally don't think that women's wrestling would be where it is without him being tip of the spear, Sunkist being tip of the spear in supporting senior level. And Jenny, like when you were 18 years old and they picked you up, right? They're not just devoted to those senior athletes, but they're younger and younger supporting athletes who have international aspirations. So, and I think that obviously this is no pun intended when I say it will bear fruit at the collegiate level. But I think that, right, that NCAA women's wrestling, when that is announced as an official sport, I mean, I think many people are going to be able to look at Art Martori and say, without Art, this would not have been possible, or it would not have been possible as soon as when it does happen. All right, so, right, we talked a little bit about wrestling. There's a reason that I reached out to both of you, right? And the reason for that is not only do I know you guys, but also you're both in the medical profession, right? Jenny, when I introduced her at the beginning, right? Dr. Jenny Wong, medical doctor. Steph, you're a physician's assistant. So how did your wrestling career help prepare you for the schooling that you went through and also your current careers?
Are we going back? Okay. So I feel that wrestling, much like everything, helps with just, you're used to hard work and you're used to giving 100% of whatever you have. And it teaches you that, and it teaches you that you can go beyond whatever limits that you think you have. It teaches you can go further than that and you can push yourself harder. And I think to be successful in any field, but particularly medicine, that it's required. And the other thing is, there's so much information. Again, with wrestling, there's so much information and so many different techniques you can learn. As with medicine, there's so many different things that you can learn as well. And it's constantly evolving. So both of them, I feel like it's almost a mirror image where, there's tons of technique you can learn. You become proficient in different areas, and the fields are constantly evolving, and you need to continually improve so that you can, effectively, one, compete, or two, treat your patients.
Yeah, I think Stephanie is right on. I think I would have had a really hard time doing medicine if it wasn't for wrestling, because wrestling is like life, and medicine is hard. And you know, you just go in expecting it to be hard, and then you just know that you've pushed through wrestling, you know, in the toughest rooms in the world. And you know, when it gets hard, you have to keep pushing through. If you have a bad day or have a rough test, you just have to go back to the drawing board and clean things up, and then go back and do better next time. Or same thing with a patient. So the work ethic and perseverance definitely came from wrestling. Also, I mean, I did residency in emergency medicine. So a big part of that is being calm, you know, when shit hits the fan. So like if a patient is literally dying in front of you, you have to stay calm. Kind of like in a tournament, if they call you up early, you can't freak out and be like, oh my God, I can't do this. You have to stay calm and you have to get the job done. So like in the ER, you definitely have to stay calm, because if the doctor is not calm, then how can you expect the techs, the nurses, and everyone else to stay calm? You just have to, you know, focus on that moment at hand and take care of business. And if you have to be upset later, you can, but you just have to get it done. And then I really like what Stephanie said as far as the skills. You know, you are just constantly trying to learn, you know, because not everyone goes by the book, so you have to learn how to deal with things, manage things in different ways. And medicine, you're just constantly obtaining skills and bettering yourself, because the game, just like wrestling, it keeps advancing. And if you just lay back on your laurels, then you're going to be left far behind.
Yeah, and I think, Jenny, where did you do your ER residency that you were just speaking of?
I did it in Clinton Township, which is a suburb of the Detroit area.
And the reason I asked that is I think I saw something that you had posted on social media referencing to that hospital or that area or something. So, so when you guys were competing, and I'm pretty sure you guys competed against each other as well, right? In the 48, 51 kilo.
More than once.
Bouncing. What's that?
I said more than once.
Yeah. So not only obviously training together, but many nights, I'm sure, on tours together in remote places across the world. Lot of that lends itself to conversations, right? So I'm curious to know, when you guys were in those situations, did you share your professional aspirations to say, hey, you know, when I hang up my shoes, this is what I plan on doing? Or, oh, that's cool, I've thought about doing that. Or, you know, is that stuff that you guys would go in depth about, or was it not until after, and all of a sudden you look each other up and you're like, man, she's a PA. Oh, wow, she's a medical doctor. How did that play out?
I don't know that we really talked about it.
Exactly.
My closest friends knew my intentions. I mean, it was my intention all along, even before I started wrestling. But it's not something that I really talked about it to a lot of people. But you know, then we see each other at tournaments and we're like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, you're a PA. That's awesome. So just kind of found out about it after the fact. Would you agree?
Yeah, pretty much. I would say that I don't think we ever had that conversation while we were competing. And it was, I want to say when we were at Fargo, because we were both helping out Jim, that we were both working for like the medical side of the tournament. And that's when I found out what you were doing. Although I don't know if I knew that you're going into emergency med. Maybe you were still in medical school, or you were just finished or something like that. But
Possibly.
Yeah. So, right, you both mentioned Fargo, so we'll touch on that. Jim, when you mentioned Jim, we're talking about Jim Porter, right?
Mhm.
long time chief medical officer
Yeah.
for many USA wrestling events, whether they were the US Open when it was in Las Vegas where Jim lived, whether it was in Fargo. So I know there's many people across the country that have, you know, been treated by Jim Porter. Right, a lot of people, a lot of wrestlers, and a lot of people in the medical professional probably owe a lot to Jim Porter. So I'm curious to know, not only right in Fargo, but what led you to the decision to get involved, you know, in what I would say is give back to the wrestling
Mhm.
community, whether it's being an athletic trainer or not an athletic trainer, I'm sorry, being one of the medical personnel in Fargo at the Junior National Championship, you know, where there's upwards of 5,000 registrants for that event. And I mean, that's just a massive undertaking. And you raise your hand and you say, hey, I'll go to Fargo, North Dakota, and I'll stay in Pavic Hall, and, you know, I'll eat in the cafeteria or the dining hall 3 days or 3 meals a day, and get up for weigh-ins and be down in the tunnel administering care. I mean, that's right commitment. And I know, Steph, you served on the Junior Olympic Wrestling Committee for 10 years. That's the grassroots representation of our sport. So really long-winded question, but what led you both to give back to the sport and to USA Wrestling?
I definitely think that it's the nature of the sport more so than anything else. I think, as far as just giving back in general, wrestling is one of those, you know, obviously the team individual sport, right? So nobody's out there on the mat with you when you're actually competing, but in order to make it there and be successful, you need everyone around you and a whole support team. So without everyone's um, support of you, you would never make your goal. And so I felt and still feel that giving back is, it's pretty much, I don't want to say it's an obligation, but I feel very strongly that everyone, you know, if you're able to give back, I would say any wrestler or anybody that's been a wrestler for a period of time in their life, if they're able to help someone, I don't know a single one that would be like, forget it, I'm not helping them. Even I remember I was, you know, one of the many sort of adventures in travel. I was stuck in Sweden, and the very last section of my trip, well, actually, that wasn't the last section now that I think about it, but it was pretty, I don't know, it was sort of ongoing. I ran into a Swedish wrestler, and he just happened to be a club member for the club that just had our competition, which was Clip On. And he was like, oh, no problem. I'll completely show you how to get to wherever you need to go. And took me all the way to the airport and was like, okay, see you later. And, you know, never asked for anything other than was just grateful to help. And so I think that was just sort of, ironically, that was a trip when I had double tours. I was in Sweden and then went to Russia. But when I ended up in Russia, I was there a day early. And Ben Peterson, of all people, was in Russia when I ended up there early. So I got to meet him as a side note from that. And I think I was one of the first women wrestlers that he had met, but it's only because we had started so early. But it was really eye-opening that you're like, what the heck are you doing all this way over here? But so long story short, yes, I think that giving back is important to me because I feel like so many people helped me to get me, helped me to achieve my wrestling goals. And if I can facilitate that in any way for somebody else, then that's what I want to do. I feel like being the medicine portion of it, when I actually tore my PCL LCL during my finals match in 2000. And Jim Porter was the one that evaluated me at the mat. And so it was kind of full circle that I got to come back and was now able to see everything that was going on and be able to go into that as field as well. So
ironic that right? Then you wind up years later working with Jim in Fargo.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think part of, and it is ironic, absolutely. I think being both an athlete as well as the medical provider, it lends insight. So I'm able to see both sides of the coin as well. So, and then obviously a lot of our medical professionals that do give back have wrestled in the past. And so I think that's also nice.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Again, Stephanie's right on. So Jim Porter, of course, we all know him, and he's like an institution at the tournaments, right? And then also there's Dr. BJ Anderson and Dr. Ken Lane. Those are two of the docs that cover Fargo. And BJ actually, he treated my first ringworm in high school. Because he's from Minnesota, and he'd treat the University of Minnesota wrestlers, and then so yeah, he treated my first ringworm. And Dr. Lane, he was one of the doctors on overseas trips, and so they really kind of became mentors to me. And like Stephanie said, wrestling, it's given me so much, and so it was always my intention to give back. And also, yes, we understand the athletes, and I think that makes it more applicable for them, more useful. We're not going to be like, just take time off the mat like 3 weeks and not let them do anything, because wrestlers won't do that. And then also it's more gratifying to us, trying to help wrestlers do the best they can, because there are so many people, I could never even count, who, went out of their way to help me or help us. But anyways, been helping out at some world championships and Olympic trials and nationals, and Fargo is, like the least glamorous thing. It's the biggest grind. You're like dead tired, by the end of it. But, there's a chance to, help these young athletes. And I think there's a lot of satisfaction in that. So actually, Jim Porter had messaged me a couple months ago asking me if I would cover Fargo, which, kind of a big ask, because usually it'd be like me and one of the other docs covering for half the week, but Dr. Lane unfortunately can't make it this year. So I was gonna have to put my big girl panties on and do it. And I hope to God that, things calm down with this pandemic that we have going on, and, that I can go and help out in that way, because it's an honor, and then I want to go and do a good job and see the athletes and see our wrestling family. But we'll just have to see how that goes for now.
Yeah, what I would say is stay tuned, right? Whether or not that event happens. And I'm not trying to tip my hand at all. I think you probably are aware that USA Wrestling has postponed or canceled all of our regional and national events through May 10th. But obviously the discussion amongst people in the office and people outside of our office and event hosts and state leaders is, hey, what does it look like, right? There's events after May 10th, culminating in Fargo the third week of July. So certainly what I would say is there's thousands of people that want to compete, right? But we need to make sure that it's the right environment to do that. So
Exactly.
so we'll get to obviously we're talking about COVID-19. So we'll get to that. But I have a question for both of you. When someone comes in and you've seen someone has nothing to do with wrestling, when they find out that you were a wrestler, obviously you can speak a common language if they are a wrestler too, but how has that helped both of you to, what I would say is, build instant rapport, that you're not just the PA seeing them or not just the doctor seeing them, but that you're a wrestler and you understand what that athlete is going through, or, that you probably can relate and say, hey, when I was 21, this happened, or when I was in Istanbul competing, I did the same thing to my knee, or yeah, I've had my ear drained, or whatever it is. And then the look that people give you when they find out that, right? I mean, that you were a wrestler, I would imagine that helps, but I'm curious to know, right? How that's played out for both of you in real life.
I think it's made a big difference. So I did residency in emergency medicine, but I did a fellowship in sports medicine. So that's mostly what I'm doing right now. So non-operative orthopedics. So I have a lot of young wrestlers, and you know, I'll have someone come in and I'll be like, what happened? And then because mechanism is everything when you're trying to determine what injury that they have. And then I had this one patient, he said, I fell. And I said, okay, what happened? And then he turns out, you know, he was defending a takedown and the guy ran the pipe and then put his shoulder in and tweaked his MCL. And so when I, you know, kind of put the technique in there and he's like, oh, okay. And then he got a lot more animated and he was able to tell me a lot more. Or, you know, I have someone with a AC joint sprain. And then most doctors are going to be like, just rest it, stay off the mat for 3 weeks, and then you're going to be fine. And then remembering me back then, you know, I was not going to stay off the mat for 3 weeks doing nothing. So instead I like to let them know what they can safely do. Like, you can take people down, but don't let people take you down fully. You know, they can get in the shot, but don't let them drive you over. Maybe you can do top parterre, but don't do defending parterre, and then I can give them those kind of specifications. And then, you know, with the rapport with the patient, it makes a huge difference, because if a patient doesn't feel like you're understanding them, they're not going to take your advice. You know, they're not going to buy into the plan. But if they feel heard and they feel understood and they feel like you know what they're going through, then they're going to trust you. They're going to believe what you're telling them, and then, you know, the chances are higher that they're going to follow through with the treatment plan and the rehab, and you know, if you're asking them to take a little bit easier on certain things. So it makes a big difference.
Did you, when with that athlete, you tell them just stuff the head next time a guy gets in on a shot? Just kidding. Just kidding.
No, I try not to judge them on their technique.
Which they probably appreciate,
like,
right?
Maybe next time you can, you know, push the head away a little bit. But I try not to bring that in. I'm trying to be on their side.
Perfect. So I think that building rapport with your patients in any way is probably one of the most important things, especially I guess it depends on which field you're in. If you're in primary care, although I'm not in primary care, if you're in primary care, you have a longer period of time to build a relationship with your patient, because you're going to be seeing them frequently and over again. I feel like other fields, say urgent care or emergency care, you probably won't be seeing the same patient, or hopefully you won't be seeing the same patient over and over again. And so creating that rapport is even more important, and being able to find a common ground, in addition to diagnostically, like what Jenny's talking about, how the technique is particularly done. It's huge to create that rapport with the patient so they can trust you and tell you exactly what happened and exactly what's going on. So I think that she's right on as far as that goes. And yeah, I agree. You know, I feel that wrestling, it has helped me in that manner as well. I was in orthopedics, and I'm currently in trauma. So although I don't think we've had any particular, I take it back. We have, when the state tournament was on, I think we had a couple people because they had hurt their necks and that type of thing. And so that was considered a trauma that they came in. But I would say, for the most part, fortunately, we don't have people that come in because of wrestling, as for either a modified or a full trauma. So that's thankful, actually.
Yeah, right. Like certainly injuries happen, but if we have less injuries in the sport of wrestling, there's still other sports that are going to keep both of you busy.
Yes, absolutely.
So what, you know, as you look at, you know, your careers on and off the mat, I'll we'll have Steph, if you want to answer this first. I'm curious to know, what are you most proud of on the mat and off the mat?
I guess on the mat, I'm most proud of just being consistent. I I don't know. I tried to just continue to learn as much as I could from as many different people that were there, and tried to keep an open mind. I think several coaches, Coach Say, I think actually probably showed me this as an example that, when he was asking a question, he would always, it didn't matter where the source was from, whether it was, the Olympic champion that's in the room versus somebody that's really new. The new person might have a different perspective or a different take on what was happening. And to me, he was always very respectful and willing to listen to everyone. And so that was a huge lesson for me to learn, that being open to whichever source, you might find the answer in an unexpected place. And so I think I'm proud of trying to do that and trying to stay consistent. And what I mean by consistency is that when you are first, or when you win your first national championship, it's great and you're super excited. But being the underdog, there's actually a lot less pressure than trying to stay on top. Because when you are already first in whichever weight class, everyone is gunning for you. Everybody watches what you do. Everybody sees what you do. And I think that there's an added pressure and expectation that comes along with that. So I think that one of the things I'm proud of is being able to remain relevant for such a long period of time, I guess, as far as that goes. And the second portion of the question was, I think medically, you're like,
yeah, what are you most proud of off the mat? Right? It could be profession, or it could be something else.
Okay. I actually, one of the things I'm most proud of was that we had essentially, my mom had gotten sick, and it was sort of a blessing that I was in wrestling at the time, because I was able to take time off and help my family. And I'm really proud and glad that I was able to do that. And so I'm proud that I was able to go and help them for like an extended period of time. And I don't know, granted, I think it's everybody's intention to help their family and to be there. But I want to say because of wrestling, but because I wrestled for so long, I hadn't started a career. I didn't start a family. I didn't start all those things. And I think those all would have prevented me from being able to be available and help. And because of that, and obviously everybody helps their families, and not that they should choose between the two, but sometimes it's just not feasible, to help both situations. So I feel like that was another blessing that wrestling enabled me to do, was to be able to care for my family when the time came. So I'm grateful for that.
That's really cool. Really cool. Jenny, what are you most proud of on and off the mat?
As far as on the mat, I don't think, there's any one particular accomplishment that, made me super proud, but really it's the whole journey. So I was really a terrible wrestler when I first started in high school. I didn't win a single match for the first 2.5 years of high school wrestling. But then, just kept chipping away, kept gathering skills and drilling and working on my technique. And then, by senior year, I was like 500 against the guys. So I know there's some girls that have won state championships. I wasn't quite that good, but I think that just starting from being really terrible to, making world teams, world medal, things like that. I'm super proud of how far I went, just, um, just from pure working hard and a lot of people helping me. Similarly, I guess in the medical field, I did struggle, starting med school after having been an athlete. Then you're just thrown into med school and they're shooting information at you like a fire hose. And so it was hard. And then my first board exams weren't the best, they were a little average. But then, as I went on, I got the hang of it. Ended up, having my board exams, being towards the top. And then in residency, I struggled a little bit, but that ended up, having my exam scores be a lot better. And then in fellowship, got top fellow. It's just, starting from struggling and not being so great, and then just persevering and working, and just being really persistent. I think that's the biggest thing. And without wrestling, I don't think I would have had the power to do that.
That's great, right? I think, right, both of you being able to rely on wrestling, or because of wrestling, you're in a certain position at a stage in your life that made things that may not have otherwise been possible. So that was really cool to hear. So obviously, right, you're both professionally in the medical field. This is a little bit of an open-ended question. Currently in the COVID-19 pandemic that we're all in, I'm curious to know if you have any firsthand accounts that you'd like to share. Steph, what it's like on Oahu, in your area, or Jenny, I know that on social media you had posted a firsthand account about a month ago from an MD friend of yours who was fighting COVID-19 at the time. I know for me, when I read that, I screenshotted it and sent it to coworkers. I'm like, this looks legit, like it wasn't, this dramatized thing. It was like, hey, this is reality. So I think both of you are witness to probably a different set of reality right now than, right, someone like me, who I go from my house to my shed to get on my computer. We order our groceries in, but aren't seeing anything that you two are seeing from a firsthand experience.
For Hawaii, we are a little bit different than most places, only because we're so geographically isolated. I think there's a tendency to, I don't know, I guess sometimes forget it, sometimes not. And because of that, I think everything for Hawaii was lagging behind a little bit. We do have a lot of international travelers, as well as people coming essentially from outer island. And what I mean by outer island is literally other islands that are part of the Hawaiian chain, as well as the mainland itself, or international destinations. So we have all of these different people coming to Hawaii, and literally, I would say tourism is one of our, hugest revenue streams. Everybody from, hotels to hotel workers to, it's just an enormous section of our economy. And so that was a really big hit early on. I think that everyone here tried to, there's a large portion of our population that is elderly, or our ohana has a large section of that. And I would say typically they're fairly healthy, but it's very concerning because we have such a large population. And I feel that everyone was really trying to do their part and stay home and social distance. I think one thing I saw was the first day that there was social distancing and the non-essential workers were supposed to stay home. The first thing I saw on TV was the beaches in Florida that were packed. And Fortunately, I didn't see that in Hawaii, which I actually didn't go to Hawaii, so I don't know if they didn't report it or if it didn't really happen. So I'm thinking that it didn't happen, because if it would have, I think it would have been all over the news. So I think it's fortunate for that. People are considering their family and considering different things going on as well. I feel that as far as the actual impact for Hawaii, other than economically going, one of the things that I've seen is that we haven't necessarily hit our peak as far as the number of cases continues to be at a fairly significant level at this point. I'm not sure when that peak is supposed to be. I think that they initially estimated it out just a little bit further, and they changed it, and it varies day to day as far as how, I guess they're just making projections so that they can anticipate an influx of need for resources and what's available. Fortunately, there's an incredible medical community in Hawaii that is really trying to maximize the total resources that we have. So we're very fortunate in that aspect. Again, being geographically isolated, I think that other things come into play, like shipping, because obviously everything has to be brought here from somewhere, as far as medical supplies and everything along those lines. So I feel like everyone's trying to do their part and bring all of that in. One thing I did see that was kind of interesting was that, a lot of people were, while being socially isolated and sort of coming back to wrestling, what are you doing to stay in shape, and what are you doing in the meantime? And I think that there was some people were like running together or biking together and all of those things. And it was said that needing to maintain even more distance, especially when you're running or biking or something, because the droplets and everything are still in the air, so that when you're slipstreaming behind, like if two people are riding a bicycle and you're in the slipstream, making sure that you're having added distance or not in that slipstream, maybe go side by side or something where you're away from that person and not actually getting the aerosols or the droplets coming right back at you, which is, I don't know, as a side note with the COVID.
All I can think about, it helped me out on the name of the movie, the 1980s bicycle racing movie, when you were talking about.
Yeah, the one where he's like sticking the pipe in because he's like the foreigner and he like falls. Yeah, I don't know the name of that movie, but yes, I remember that movie.
So that's interesting, and Jenny, I'm sure you'll be able to add to that as well. But even right, social distancing and stay-at-home orders doesn't mean just get on your bike and go on this big ride with your buddies. So
absolutely,
yeah. Jenny, I know when I was asking the question, I alluded to your social media post about, or that you had shared from your friend. You want to elaborate on that, or are there more things? I know social distancing and wrestling, by the way, right? They're not.
Yeah.
They don't go together. No,
it's really
most of the time.
Say that again.
They don't go together most of the time.
No, they don't, unless we're on opposite ends of the wrestling room, just working on stance and motion by ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
And aside from that, right?
Yeah.
But even obviously beyond wrestling, I'm curious to hear if Jenny, if you have anything to talk about as it relates.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm doing non-operative orthopedics right now, sports medicine, because that's, what I decide to choose for as far as my job. But I'm still board certified, residency trained emergency medicine physician. And, some places they're having a shortage of doctors. So, so all the emergency medicine that I had thought that I was going to be done with, if worst comes to worst, I would definitely go back and help out. So California, Governor Newsom, he made this health corps for California, for volunteers. So I signed up for that. I let my boss know that this was a possibility, and my coworkers were supportive. About the PPE shortage. I'm accumulating some equipment, because unfortunately we can't trust that there's going to be protective equipment. I've got a respirator coming just in case. It's insurance, but you know, it's a possibility. So I'd rather be ready. And then I've been studying the emergency medicine stuff, you know, ventilator settings, intubation stuff, and then also the things that are particular about COVID-19, you know, because it's not just the flu. It's actually behaving very differently. And so everything changes day to day. You know, sometimes they say certain medications are indicated. The next day they'll be like, they're not. What's interesting about this pandemic is number one, it's behaving differently than the normal like influenza or respiratory illnesses. Number two, you know, it's affecting the world, and there's actually Facebook groups of physicians and advanced practitioners that are dedicated. You know, there's like 22,000 emergency medicine physicians in one, and like 25,000 physicians around the world in another group, and we're all just, you know, sharing ideas, going into like the pathophysiology that could maybe possibly lead to some treatment or some therapy updates. And so it's really interesting how this pandemic is going, because we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants, but at the same time, we want to support our colleagues around the world and try to come up with the best practices that would hopefully give the best outcomes for our patients. So it's been interesting. I've been thinking about structure and function as far as, you know, sports medicine, but now I'm having to go back and think about, you know, pathophysiology and you know, if it happens, I'm ready to go in and help. And I'd be happy to, but at the same time, it's a little scary. And then you talked about my residency. The Detroit area, as we know, is getting hit really hard. I think on Tuesday, they said there was like 734 healthcare workers that were in the hospital system that were positive for COVID-19 or the coronavirus. And you know, there's a lot of people dying there, a lot of people really sick, and I'm thinking about my colleagues. And then also, you know, you hear about doctors and nurses dying, and that's something that I'm afraid to see. You know, I kind of look in the news and I don't want to hear any bad news. So in that way, it's kind of affected me. As far as my practice, we've been trying to protect the patients by making a lot of the visits telephone visits, unless they have to come in and I have to put a cast on them or check anything that might be you know, lead to permanent deficits. So we're having a few patients come in, but we're trying to do mostly things by phone call.
Cool. And I would imagine, right, some of the the changes that have taken place to, even if it's something as simple as now people are used to being on Zoom calls more often than they were before, or people are now like, maybe it's getting hammered home about, hey, you got to wash your hands, or, you know, can you go to the grocery store once a week instead of twice a week? Probably, right? Those little things that I think will have a lasting impact. Mm-hmm. But those are very minimal. I think, obviously, not seeing patients, I don't know if that's practical once this happens, you know, once we're past this. I don't know. I'm no expert.
No,
I know one thing.
Difficult.
What's that?
It's difficult. It's difficult trying to diagnose orthopedic injuries. Like, the story is a really big part of it. You know, the imaging is a little part of it, but a big part of it is the physical exam. And so trying to find ways to be creative, to ask patients questions, to try to figure out, you know, what's going to be the best treatment option for them. It's a little challenging, but, you know, if it keeps people safe, you know, someone's not going to die if they miss having their steroid injection in their knee. But if I have them come to the clinic and they get sick, you know, someone could die from that. So I take that very seriously. So, you know, that's why we're kind of trying to all adjust and be flexible and do the best we can while keeping the patient safe.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. And Steph, this is, you know, thinking about your relation from a geographic standpoint, right? Hawaii, it borders no other state. So you're not getting, you know, people driving in. I would imagine that the tourism you said is have an economy based on that. That's really slowed. Have you noticed that life is a much different pace with only the people from the island on the island?
Yes, actually, there's a huge difference. I think that one of the things that was super helpful was there's a 14-day quarantine for anybody that comes into the island from pretty much anywhere. So even from outer island to Oahu, or from California, or from Japan, or wherever it is. And I don't know if the airlines really helped us in this fact, because I think the fares were like $200 round trip or something like that. So you could get here, but then you'd have to stay in your hotel room. And they had a number of tourists that came early on and did that. And then, we're at the beach and they're like, what are you doing at the beach? And all this kind of stuff. So I think that there's more of an understanding of, hey, really, you know what, the flights are inexpensive, but don't come. And so I think that was helpful. As far as just quarantine goes, I think that everybody is really aware, or is, as the word continues to get out, having more awareness of, hey, this is what we should be doing, this is what's going on, as well as, I think a lot of the stores are cognizant of the fact that we do have a very independent elderly population, and I would say a large portion has family that helps them, but there is a population that does not. And so as such, they've changed hours so that during certain hours, and I don't know if it's like this where you guys are, certain hours are sort of earmarked for our more sort of vulnerable population. So usually in the morning hours, almost every store that I know of is isolated or has set aside hours specific for that population. In addition to probably, being able to deliver things more and obviously stay home and have things delivered. So I think both of those things are really good. And I did want to touch base, I think that Jenny mentioned that she had signed up for the California Health Corps. I actually don't know if that was the right name or not, but that I'm not surprised at all. She was always very selfless, and I'm sure she was like first on the list to sign up, because whenever there was a need, she was always right there.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if we have the skill, we should, be able to help. And I know that you wouldn't hesitate to step up either. So.
But, you did, and you also mentioned the fear factor. There is, especially early on when there was not a clear-cut path as far as the how it was being transmitted from patient to patient, whether it was just droplet or aerosol or both, or what's going on. And along with the shortage of PPE and different things along those lines, I think those are all worries and all concerns. And it's not, yeah.
So it is, but, I was scared every time I stepped on a wrestling mat, right? But we just had to try to control what we can control, and then, do the best we can with what we had at the time. And so, I'm trying to accumulate my own PPE, and, I try to be smart about, putting on the PPE and taking it off, and decontaminating myself and everything. And so same thing, you have to focus on what you can control and do the best you can. Because there's a need there, and it'd be hard for me to say no, right? And I know you feel the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, I give you more credit than me, because I was already in a situation. I was already on the trauma team prior to COVID, so it's sort of a natural progression that we're still front line. But if you were not necessarily in the front line where you would necessarily have a lot of exposure and you're volunteering to do all that, I give you way more props for that.
Well, they're making jokes about having psychiatrists and gynecologists intubate. I'm like, well, I might be a little rusty, but I'd probably be better at that, having intubated a lot in residency. So
I would definitely pick you over psychiatrists. No offense to them, but yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Most of the medical jokes are flying over my head, right? But And I appreciate you guys bouncing back and forth. So is there, do either of you, I mean, certainly I asked a variety of questions, had you for about an hour. Certainly appreciate it. I know, right, taking time out of your schedules. I know when we were going back and forth trying to arrange it, Jenny, you're like, let me check. Yep, I'm going to be at home. Right? If it's not working. I think everyone's in the same boat, but I certainly appreciate not only for you both to make yourselves available, but also for answering the questions. Right? It wasn't, I know that they weren't necessarily cookie cutter, just like, oh, you wrestled. Okay, cool. That both of you took the liberty to go in depth, provide what I would say is the backstory, and not just necessarily answer the question. So certainly appreciate that. Do either of you have any last bits of insight, or maybe a funny story about the other you want to share, or anything of that sort before we sign off?
I just like to say, for the wrestling community in general, I know that everyone is super antsy. We hate being off the mat. I've been doing and competing in jiu-jitsu now because they have an old people division, for above 30. And I'm definitely missing that a lot. But I think it's important for us to maintain our social distancing, and not get weak and not break at this point. One example I like to give, like you said, wrestling is a very close physically sport as is jiu-jitsu. One example is they had a choir practice in Seattle on March 10th, and there was 60 healthy individuals that went to that practice, no symptoms. They cleaned their hands. They were within the guidelines at the time. They didn't hug each other, didn't shake hands. After a 2.5-hour practice, 20 days later, of the 60 people that went, 45 of them were either COVID positive or suspected to be, having symptoms, but we don't have enough testing. So just presumed to be COVID positive. So that's 75% of the people at this practice. And, and in choir, you're projecting your voice, we think that this illness can be spread by not only droplets, when you sneeze, but also aerosolized, so smaller particles. It's just very contagious, very easily transmissible. And so if these people are singing next to each other, you can only imagine if people were wrestling with each other and breathing on each other and sweating on each other, how dangerous that could be. And, not even, maybe for the people that have it, although we've seen it, affect all ages. But, some people are asymptomatic, could pick it up, bring it home, and then, spread it that way. So it's just best to socially distance for now. I know it's really hard, but we need to keep it up. There's some treatments and some vaccines that we're kind of working on, but that's not ready. And again, we don't know the best way to treat this. So the only thing that we have that we know that works is social distancing. And there's signs that it's helping. We're kind of flattening the curve, so to speak, especially here in the Bay Area, where we've been pretty progressive about, shutting ourselves down. But, if it's like in a match, if you wrestle hard 6 or 5 minutes and then the last minute you kind of let up, it's for naught. And, things can go out of control that way. So we're doing good. We're doing a good job, but we need to keep it up until we have this, in the bag, so to speak. So I just want to put that out there because I know that a lot of people are getting ready to break on that social distancing thing because they're missing wrestling, and I love wrestling and I love jiu-jitsu, but we just can't right now.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Steph, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share?
I agree with Jenny as far as the social distancing and the analogy that she used for wrestling. I thought that was really great. I also feel that, going forward, we're unsure of what the new norm is going to be and what it's going to look like. But I'm sure that with time, you know, it just takes time for everything to plan out, and definitely flattening the curve in order to be able to help everybody that we could with the resources that we have, I think is going to be the biggest portion of that, which obviously everybody's social distancing is helping. I do feel for everyone that, you know, missed competitions or was unable to complete their competitions and do everything, or, you know, for their senior year to their senior year in college. I feel for them, and just wanted to, you know, I think that their sacrifice, even, you know, and even if you go a little bit further, you know, even from the Olympic team, you know, a year makes a huge difference as far as, you know, who's competing, what's happening, is somebody sore versus not, are they healed, are they in shape, are they, you know, there's so many different aspects that it affects, that it's just a cascade of different things. But paying attention and making sure you see the bigger picture, I think is hugely important.
Yeah, no, thanks. And right, I certainly echo the amount of seasons that got cut short. I mean, you talk about at the college level, right? But there's many of our freestyle and Greco-Roman events at a state level, at a local level, right, are not going to happen.
Absolutely.
But I think what we've said, and I would probably put words in your mouth, is that now is not the time to get better at wrestling. Now is the time, or let me rephrase it. Now is not the time to get better at wrestling by practicing or competing with other people. Right.
Yeah.
So I think both of you certainly hammered that point home, made it very relatable to wrestlers, right? Talking about a 6-minute match, and if you take your foot off the gas in the 6th minute, the outcome can be way different. So I mean, certainly, right, both of you made it crystal clear, with a medical background to someone like me or the people viewing, that many of them do not have that same level of training and knowledge and expertise that you guys do. Right. So again, thanks for that. But more importantly, what I would say is thanks to both of you for making time, joining us on this most recent segment of Moments Off the Mat. I've exhausted my questions for both of you. So I'll let you both get on with your day, and we'll sign off in terms of the interview.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you.